Okay, so we'll get started. Wanted to say thank you to everyone who came out tonight. This is going to be a great talk from one of the leaders in the field of emergency management, especially in Florida. He's very, very accomplished. He got a, let's see, bachelor's degree from Cornell University, MBA from George Washington University, grad certificate in emergency and crisis management, also from George Washington University. He served as a training officer for the presidential contingency programs when he was serving in the U.S. Navy. Served in the White House Military Office for the Presidential Emergency Operations Center. I served as a White House contractor for SRA International. And more recently, he was the operations manager and director of emergency management for Walmart, where he oversaw emergency operations for over like 8,500 facilities, 2.2 million employees worldwide. In 2011, he was appointed to serve as the director of the Florida Division of Emergency Management by Governor Rick Scott. He did a lot there. I mean, he helped with the comprehensive statewide emergency management plan. He helped with training exercises, served as a liaison to state and federal agencies for FDEM, and he focused a lot on relationship building and a lot of crossover for state preparedness between agencies. And that's going to be the big focus of the talk tonight is the importance of relationships and networking in emergency management, the vital role that those play. And I'm going to pass it over now to our speaker, Bryan Koon. Thank you for being here, Bryan. Oh, I think you're muted, Bryan.
Again. All right, there we go. My phone went into safe driving mode. There we go. You got me now?
Yep.
All right, sorry about that. Hello, everybody. I will apologize in advance for any internet stuttering. My wife and 3 sons are at home, so it's likely that my bandwidth will start to decline here. So hopefully it'll come back if it goes away. I told Stefan early on, it's first of all, this was his idea for a topic, and it's a great idea, so thank you for suggesting it. This will go much better if all of you just chime in and ask questions whenever you like. I tell people when I talk, especially in situations like this, if whatever line of topic I'm on at the time is boring you, then ask a question and redirect me. I won't be offended. And frankly, these are a lot more fun the more questions you ask. So jump in. And anytime you want, and we'll, talk about whatever you guys want. So, but, specifically, Stefan's idea was that many of you would be attending the Governor's Hurricane Conference this year. And, what was the role of networking? What should you expect while you're down there, et cetera? So I'll just do a quick question. How many of you have been to it before? I don't know the best way to ask that question. I think if you talk, you'll pop up on my screen. So if you've been to it before, just say, yeah, whatever. Stefan, have you been? No, okay. Anybody else? Has anybody been? I mean, last year it was canceled or it went virtual, and the year before it just seems like forever ago. So the good news is that, especially in this field, emergency management, it is a very, very small field, and you will continue to encounter the same people over and over and over again. So that's mostly good. It can be bad, but it's mostly good. And frankly, the people that you get a chance to meet with at Governor's Hurricane Conference this year, you will run into for the next 20 or 30 years, probably throughout your career. And they, people just pop up all of the time. So going to conferences, going to association meetings, doing these kinds of things are fantastic ways to really establish a baseline of people that you know in the industry, because those will be the people with whom you will engage for, frankly, your entire working career. I'll give you a few just examples, I think, from my own background to kind of highlight that. So, and Stefan covered my biography pretty good there, but, so really for me, I was working at the White House, started in 98, and I was there till about 2006. But I went to, I started kind of shifting from what I was doing at the White House, which was more continuity of government, military, DC type stuff, to more emergency management, because I was working on that graduate certificate at George Washington. And so in 2004, I started, kind of deciding I want to do something different. So I started looking around for jobs. I hadn't done a whole lot of networking. The only networking I knew were DC type folks and White House and military type folks. But I wanted something outside of DC, wanted to go somewhere else. And so I really was just cold calling people and applying out of the blue for things. And I lucked into a job opening at Walmart, Walmart Emergency Management. So in 2004, I applied for that job, and it was a great experience. I applied for it. I flew to Bentonville, got the interview, got offered the job, and then turned it down, which is not always a great idea, particularly after somebody flies you out there to then decide that you're not really wanting that job. But I stayed in touch with them. Jason Jackson was the director there at the time. I stayed in touch. We communicated, every so often. And then Katrina happened. And in 2006, I said, all right, now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to leave DC. So it just so happened, because I'd stayed in touch, the next time a job opened up there, he called me, did the interview, got the job. And then April 2006, moved out to Bentonville and started working for Walmart and doing emergency management. Now, prior to that, again, I had been fairly insular in, everybody I knew in the community, in my engagement, et cetera. But as soon as I got to Walmart, it ramped up quite a bit on a few fronts. One was we started doing, it was April 2006, so right before hurricane season. So one of my first jobs was to go out and go to states who were doing hurricane exercises. And, again, this was the first hurricane season right after Katrina. So if you recall, and you may have read some of the case studies, some of the things that went on during Hurricane Katrina when Walmart and some other private sector entities really stepped up and provided a whole lot of support to the community, lots of food, water, places where the government weren't able to reach, Walmart did. So there was a lot of desire to engage Walmart and other private sector entities. So I got to go to a lot of state EOCs and participate in exercises. I think that I recall the 8th day of my job, I was in Austin at the Texas State Emergency Operations Center participating in the exercise. And I would frankly just be making stuff up. I'd do stuff, and at the end of the day, I'd call Jason back, hey, do we really do that? He's like, no. I was like, well, we do now, because that's what I said we were going to do. So start engaging a lot with states on that, getting to know the folks there, get to know the directors. And then in later that year, Jason, I think it was 2007, Jason was participating through an emergency management association, the National Emergency Management Association, and their conference happened to be over in Oklahoma City, which was an easy drive from Bentonville. So I went to that and started getting involved with that. They had a private sector committee. That was really an eye-opener for me. I didn't know that associations like that existed. I didn't know much about all of the state emergency management agencies. I had no idea the policy making that was going on at those kinds of events. And so I got engaged with that, started paying more attention to it, and then went, to all the meetings after that, ended up chairing the private sector committee. And through those kinds of things, really started to get to know all of the folks in the industry. Now, the good point about that was that the NEMA meetings, compared to even to Governor's Hurricane Conference or National Hurricane Conference or an IAEM meeting, were pretty small, maybe a few hundred attendees. And so they were manageable. And you could actually get around and talk to folks. In fact, I used to print out a list of the attendees and highlight who it was that I wanted to meet, because I kind of had this, I want to meet these people and talk to them about that. So I guess I wasn't intending to go through and give you an itemized list of tips, but that's one. If you can get a hold of an attendee list, identify the folks that you're interested in talking to, because that's a great way to really kind of keep track of where you are, and then on the backside to follow up on some of the conversations you had. So I would go to those meetings and really highlight the folks I hadn't met before and try to catch them and really become one, both known to them, but also to get to know them, to really understand what they were working on, what their interests were, what their pain points were, how we may be able to work together as Walmart and in whatever jurisdiction they were serving. They got to know a lot of the folks at FEMA and the Weather Service, et cetera. I'll come back to exactly how to do that in a meeting later on. Did some stuff with IAEM. It was around that time frame that I learned that there was a program at the Center for Homeland Defense and Security at the Naval Postgraduate School called the Executive Leaders Program. Some of you may be familiar with, they have a master's degree program out at the Naval Postgraduate School. That one is specific to government employees. You have to be a government employee to do that one. But the ELP program, the Executive Leaders Program, was open to private sector folks as well, and it was a non-degree program. So it was really it's a master's degree light. It's only a 4 1-week sessions. You don't have to write a paper. It's much easier. And so I went out to that, and there were about 30 people or so in that class. And a few, again, great mixing together of people who I'm still talking to today. Dan Summers, the EM director down in Collier County, was in that class. Let's see, what's his name? Andrew Velasquez, who at the time was the state of Illinois director, later became a FEMA Region 5 administrator. Now he's a director at O'Hare Airport. One name that you'll know here pretty soon, if you don't already, Deanne Criswell was in that class. Deanne at the time was the emergency management director for the city of Aurora. Today, she is the nominee to be the head of FEMA. And so 14 years ago, I got to be in a class with Deanne and maintain that relationship. So lots of the folks you meet today, when you go to GHC or in these meetings or these kinds of things, will be the FEMA administrators in the future. So it's great to get to know them, back when they were whatever, and watch their careers grow as yours grow and intertwine. It was through that process that I was out at Monterey. I went out there for another program. I forgot exactly what it was, but it was like an emerging technologies program or something like that. And through that, Craig Fugate was out there for one of those sessions. So I got to spend some time with Craig. He and I had never met, but our paths were starting to intertwine. He was director of Florida at the time. I grew up, he's from Alachua County. I'm from Suwannee County. It's not too far from each other. We had done another session together at Harvard, somewhere in that same time frame. So we got to know each other through that process a little bit. Then he, later on, he went to go to FEMA as administrator. But sometime in around 2000, and I know this is a meandering story, but it'll all come together, I hope, at some point. Through all of those things, I got to go, when I was at Walmart, engaged with these associations and postgraduate school, going to conferences, those kinds of things, getting to know people. And again, you get to see kind of the same people at all of these. And every time you engage with them, you get to develop the relationship with them a little bit more. So in 2010, Governor Scott was elected governor in Florida. I did not know him, but a lot of the people who were working at Walmart at the time had worked in the Bush administration. So a lot of folks who worked for Jeb Bush when he was governor, after that administration ended up working for Walmart. There were like 3 or 4 vice presidents and senior folks at Walmart who happened to have been in the Bush administration. So all of them knew Craig. And so when Governor Scott was elected and they were looking for a transition team, naturally because he was, kind of from outside politics, they went back to the Bush administration and say, hey, we need some help with the transition team. That got to me at Walmart because they were looking for some private sector folks. And so, and Craig was also in that group too, said, hey, this guy here, he can help you out. So I got involved with the transition team. Through that process, talked to the governor, he offered me the job, and that's how I ended up in Florida. Because I'd happened to meet Craig at some event, and he got to know who I was and where I was from and what I was capable of. So then in Florida for 7 years, again, even more opportunities to go out. And that's a big job. That's a big part of being state director, is frankly engaging with events, meetings, associations. So I spent a big chunk of my time giving speeches, going to meetings, IAEM, NEMA, FIPA, Florida Association of Counties, League of Cities, Realtors Association, insurance folks, you name it, I was engaging with them. And so you really get to ramp it up at that point and go out and get to meet people and get to talk to people and get to know them, which is, again, extremely beneficial. It also is a whole lot easier, frankly, when people start up and come talk to you instead of you trying to track them down. It just makes networking a lot easier when people come to you. And so that, 7 years of that job, and then now all of that up till now benefits me in my current role. So I left state government at the end of 2017. So I've been with IAEM now for about 3.5 years. But all of those relationships that I gained up till now and continue to develop today continue to pay off, because on a daily basis, I can pick up the phone or chat an email to almost anybody in emergency management, and I will either know them, have a personal connection with them, or at least they will know who I am, and take my phone call, and kind of chat with me. So just today, let me see who today, I talked to Sima Merrick, who's the Ohio director, and current NEMA president. I talked to Sam Phillips, who's the Massachusetts director. Quick conversation with Michael Cohen, who is the current, well, Michael used to work, he was the chief of staff for Craig at FEMA. When that ended, he came to work for us, IAEM, and now just as of last week, he's back at FEMA as the chief of staff. So all of these people, again, it all intertwines, and it's all people that you end up knowing. So bottom line is, the people that you get to know today, at this point in your career, you're going to keep seeing for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And that's a great thing, because it's a whole lot easier dealing with people, who know your capabilities, who trust you, what they've been through, what their issues are, and how you can help solve them. And that's really, frankly, the fun part of doing this, is you get to engage with a lot of folks who you've been through these issues with before. Even now, I'm still dealing with the folks I worked at the White House 23 years ago. One of them, the guy, when I came to the White House, the guy who was my sponsor, in the military, you have a sponsor if you go somewhere new, somebody who's there to kind of show you the ropes. He's currently the chief operating officer for the Secret Service. Another guy I worked with at the White House is the chief operating officer for the House Sergeant at Arms. And they're dealing with all the Capitol security issues right now. Another guy just ended his term as the White House Chief Information Officer. And so I've been working with him, looking for, his next career. So that's so I am a product of the ability to, get to know people, learn from them, get them to know you, and connect on both a personal and a professional level over time, which really will be beneficial to your career and open up doors for you and help, accelerate your growth and development in this area. So that's the big, broad overview. Anybody, any questions or anything you want to ask more about at this point before I just keep rambling on? I would love to see somebody ask something, because all I see is Stefan's face. So if somebody says something, I'll at least get to see somebody different. Well, I guess I could swipe on this. There we go. I can see some different faces. Yeah, I should just change my view. There we go.
I do have a question for you, Mr. Koon, if that's all right.
Please,
so
please.
You and I actually had dinner at the FIPA conference earlier last year, and so it's good to see you again. But one of the things is that I had just started the program. I was just getting my, toes in the water of emergency management, educationally at least. And so now I'm getting ready to graduate in April. And so I was kind of wondering, if you are going to be a soon-to-be graduate of the emergency management, program that's you, what would be your next steps? How would you cultivate relationships? Like, how would you outreach? How do you angle yourself?
No, so we ate at that place right next to the Hilton, right? Daytona Beach. Is that kind of outdoors? Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, bubblegum shrimp.
Thank you.
All right. So you're graduating in the spring, right?
Yeah, I'm graduating April 23rd.
Oh, all right. Are you going to go to the conference?
Probably not. I think it's only for students, isn't it, Stefan?
No, it's for, I think, anyone.
I think you can have graduated.
All right, it's for anyone. But
so if you don't have a job by then, I would absolutely go do that. Print out a bunch of business cards and go to that, because again, you can get hired in this field, out of the blue, and that's happening more and more, through submitting your resumes and doing interviews and stuff like that. And you can absolutely get a job like that. But if you know people, if when they think of a job opening, and they think, aha, that's the guy for it. I mean, you're going to be so much further along in your ability to get that job. So that's one piece of it is again, if you don't have a job by April 23rd, go to Governor's Hurricane Conference and, walk around and connect with folks, let them know you're available, flat out ask them if they're going to be looking for positions pretty soon. That's a great way to do it. Second, if you don't subscribe already to the FIPA list, they put out job openings on that all the time. I mean, I know I get emails multiple times a week about where there are job openings. And so that's a good way to go. Third is, and you may not have it now, but you can get it, find some folks who will mentor you and be on the lookout for you and help you think about what your next job steps should be. I have several folks that I do that with. The one that I'm thinking right off the top of my head is Britton Holdaway. Britton, I don't know if y'all know Britton. Britton worked, I met Britton at I think it was at a governor's hurricane conference. I was judging one of the student competitions. And so I watched his presentation. Afterwards, I said, hey, it was great. What are you doing? And he says, well, I work for you. He was happened to be doing something at FDM. He had just started. It was finishing up at FSU. I said, terrific. I'm going to reassign you to do some other stuff because I had a project that I wanted to work on. And ever since when he worked with me at DEM, he was my kind of go-to special projects guy. And then when I went to IAEM, he actually left, came to work for IAEM a while. He's now at Lee County government working there. But Britton and I are, I chat with him every month or two just to kind of keep an eye. I know where he wants to be someday. I know he wants to be a county director. So every time I see a job come open, we chat about it and discuss whether it's the right move for him and his family right now. And if it is, if he thinks it might be, I'll help him with the application process and put in a good word for him. And if he decides it's not the right one, we'll kind of keep an eye and look for the next one. So having somebody, again, having somebody who can help do that for you, you may not have it now, but look for it. Try to find somebody who you think could do that for you and who'd be interested in doing that for you. And if you can, I'm going to say the word ingratiate, which can have a negative connotation, but I mean it in the best possible way. If you can ingratiate yourself to somebody by demonstrating your ability to get stuff done and to, just cut through the clutter and deliver on something that they need done, you're likely going to find somebody who will be a big fan and supporter of yours for years to come. So, that's a great way to go. Another one, a guy hired when I was at Walmart, Lucas McDonald. In fact, I was just chatting with Lucas today. I haven't seen him in years in person, but I talk to him all the time. He's still at Walmart in emergency management. We were discussing Sarah Huckabee Sanders running for governor of Arkansas. I encouraged him to go find one of the Walton kids and have them run for governor, so we didn't have to have Sarah Huckabee Sanders as governor. That's just a personal preference. And he jokingly was talking about being director of Arkansas Department of Emergency Management, which he could easily do someday, and so hopefully there's a chance for me someday to help advocate for him to get that job. So networking, again, going out there, just talking to folks. If you, the ideal thing would be is to, have some sense that, right before you saw those folks that you knew that their job was opening up and you could go kind of talk to them about it and meet them, because again, seeing somebody face to face or on the Zoom call or in person makes a big difference, and getting them to know you and think about you is helpful. Finding those mentors. Let's see, other things I would be doing if I were looking for a job right now. Don't be, and this is easy for me to say, but don't be overly picky on the first few jobs. If you have the flexibility to get in there and do something, get in there and do something. I mean, it's not going to be necessarily for life, but you'll learn from it and you'll grow from it, and you'll take that experience into the next thing. I actually talked to a guy, Justin Nguyen. He's down at the Seminole tribe because he reached out to IAEM about something. So I called him to kind of see what I could do for him. So I used that opportunity to catch up with him. He worked for Alan Harris as an intern in Seminole County while he was a student at UCF. And he just took that job down at the Seminole tribe. Again, probably not a forever job for him, but it's a great way to get in there and start learning the craft and talking to other folks. I am not the best person to tell you how to go out and get other jobs, because I've lucked into most of what I've gotten, or just gotten extremely fortunate on it. So I haven't had to go through much of the traditional job search kind of stuff that you all will be going through or have gone through. But I will tell you, it gets easier and easier, particularly once you start to get to know people and have them approach you for taking a job. That's the best thing that you can hope for, is that people think of you and your skill set and track you down and want to have you come work for them or work with them. So that's what you should aspire to, is to get people to think, have you be top of mind when they have a task that needs accomplished. Not, it's going to take a little while to get to, but absolutely doable. So if you don't have business cards, go get some business cards. I know it seems, well, you guys tell me, prior to COVID, I would have said that's a must do, but I don't know. Is it even a must do anymore? What's the consensus on that? Is that a relic of the analog age, or are they still something that you all see value in?
I think LinkedIn is like the new business card.
Yeah.
I think you have to have both, because like for me, LinkedIn, sometimes I make connections with people that I don't personally know. And then like for me, I love when people are posting stuff that pertains to their career, but it can get kind of personal sometimes, and then I fall off of it a little bit. But I know if somebody gives me a business card, like that stays in my wallet, and every time I clean out my wallet, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to talk to that person, or like I should reach out to them.
Yeah, I like business cards too. They are a nice, tangible thing. Tell me about. I'm mixed on LinkedIn. I'm on it. I don't know. I use it. I use it. The way I use it the most is because I'm like, I'm just trying to track down people that I've met in the past whose name escapes me. And here's the interesting thing: I have like 7,500 connections on LinkedIn, or some ridiculous number. And virtually all of them came when I was director in Florida. So I would, it's just a matter when you speak in front of large groups and stuff, everybody wants to connect you. So I used to get like 10 or 20 a day, and I just accept all of them. So I think I've actually, I have too many for it to be actually useful for me, because I have no idea who most of those people are. But I know that it can be useful. I just haven't myself spent a lot of time figuring out how it can be useful. But it is a great tool to keep connected on what people are doing. And if you can mine LinkedIn. So the ideal situation is find out an attendee list for something you're going to, like Governor's Hurricane Conference, and then read up all their LinkedIn profiles, so that when you talk to this person, you know what to talk about, and you kind of get that instant conversation piece. That can be, if you're just, as you all know, standing at a cocktail party with a bunch of people you don't know, making small talk, triggering on something that is actually of interest and will sustain a conversation can be problematic. But if you guys have the opportunity to do some research on it and have something that you can grab them with, hey, I saw you're working on whatever, or that that's something they're passionate and interested about, then you got a conversation going. And frankly, one of the things people love to do at conferences and everywhere is to talk about themselves and what they're working on. So that's another piece of advice: is find out what they want to talk about and get them going. And you just sit there and ask interesting, pertinent questions, and interject some, but let them do a lot of the talking. And they'll walk away from the conversation feeling good about you, even though you've hardly said anything or really haven't done that much, because you've allowed them to kind of highlight what it is they like to talk about. Like tonight, I'll probably at 8 o'clock in this thing thinking, man, that was awesome, even though I did, just rambled on and on and on, and you guys just asked a few interesting and pertinent questions.
No, it's okay. It's super helpful, honestly. I did have a question about your time being FDEM Director.
Yeah.
Which natural disaster during your time there would you say most tested your leadership ability and most tested your use of relationships across the state?
Yeah, so it was Irma. I was extremely fortunate in the timing of when I was there. So I started in 2011, and we didn't have a hurricane until 2016. So I had a 5-year period, 5.5-year period, really, where I don't want to say all I had. I had a few tropical storms, had some flooding incidents, some small tornadoes, things here and there, but nothing that strained or stressed the system tremendously. They were enough to keep us practiced and working in the right direction, but nothing that broke us, nothing that really were catastrophic. And then Hermine and Matthew in 2016 were as hurricanes go, pretty easily manageable and doable. And then Irma was a pretty good sized storm, but by then I'd been there 6.5 years. Had a great relationship within the division. Our folks, we had a really good team going there. I had a good relationship with all of the different state agencies. The governor had trust and confidence in us. We knew the staff really well. I knew at that point, I'd been NEMA president for a couple of years, so I knew all the state directors. I knew everybody at FEMA. And so we used the opportunity to do a lot of EMAC from across the country and bring those folks in. And I knew that was beneficial. That was mutually beneficial. We brought all those teams in to assist, but also give those other states an opportunity to have their folks come down and practice on our hurricane. So that was good. It was also, we did some innovative things during that one. And one thing that reminds me is I called up the folks from Gas Buddy, and I'm trying to remember how I knew them. It had been some event a few months before where I had engaged with or seen something that they were working on. And so, the interesting thing about when you go to conferences and events like that, and you sit in enough of those workshops and panels and discussions and things like that is, when you go to them, there are all these standalone events. But if you go to enough of them and you do enough real life work, they start to synthesize and connect, and you can see the relationship between this thing here and this thing here and this thing here, which perhaps, nobody has thought of before. You start to connect the dots and find ways to bring those things together in a way that benefits the overall need there. And so, that was one of those things. So quick story there. Irma was the situation where it came right on the heels of Harvey, which impacted a lot of the refineries on the Gulf Coast in Louisiana and Texas, things like that. And so the evacuation out of Texas combined with the impact to the refineries caused a temporary fuel shortage in Florida. And it was exacerbated by this hurricane that was going straight up the coast of Florida. So we were in the middle of a fuel shortage, and there wasn't enough fuel out there. It just was a matter of the bandwidth to get it to where it needed to go. The supply chain just wasn't wide enough. So, we kept using more than was being delivered. So we were in this perpetual behind the curve situation. And then it was exacerbated by the path of the storm, which kind of, went back and forth a little bit. Looked like it was going to hit the West Coast, looked like it was going to hit the East Coast, and ended up going straight up the middle. And so we issued evacuation orders for about 7 million people during Irma, roughly a third of the state. And so a lot of people were on the road trying to go somewhere. And what we were seeing was that it was causing fuel problems. And so we were, struggling to figure out how do we help solve that problem? How can we help the gas station, fuel companies, et cetera, with that station? So I called up the folks at Gas Buddy, and, I had card, and my brothers up and said, hey, can you guys come down? And they flew down that night, from Chicago, I think, and we had a temporary facility set up over at the North Florida Fairgrounds. And the first night, that's where they slept. They didn't have a hotel room. They just came down and stayed at North Florida Fairgrounds. But they came in and immediately started working with us to help figure out where were the fuel outages occurring. And so we could go, the difficult part of the state of Florida, there's lots of anti-competitive rules and laws about gas stations that didn't allow us as a state entity to quickly determine where the fuel outages were, because the fuel companies have to be very opaque about their reporting, because then it reduces the chance of collusion and price fixing, et cetera. And so there was no good mechanism for us as a state to get real-time information about what the fuel situation was. But you could use social media and Gas Buddy to get a real good idea of where it was, because people would report where the outages were. So instead of using internal state resources to figure it out, I just went to the private sector, and those guys were able to, again, every hour produce a report of where fuel was and where fuel wasn't. And we use that to help determine where we should put police escorts, et cetera, to get the fuel tankers through and start, delivering the fuel. It was through that process that we also kind of connected it with the shelter system. And so what we were seeing was that there was, starting to see some significant fuel shortages right there at in Lake City and Gainesville, because people were coming up 75 and hitting I-10, and starting to just be significant fuel shortage there in an area that we also knew that there were a lot of hotel rooms, because it's a less populated area of the state. So less hotel rooms combined with no fuel was a bad situation. And so what we immediately did was start working with those counties to set up additional shelters, because our assumption was that these people are going to get to Lake City and run out of gas and need somewhere to stay. And so again, worked with Alachua County, worked with Columbia County, those folks, to help start setting up shelters where we would never have done it in the past, because we didn't figure that those residents were going to have any need for shelter, because the storm wasn't really going to impact them that badly. So all of that was kind of driven by a recognition and a putting together people to help solve that problem. And that's the greatest part of building out your network and knowing things, is to be able to connect the right people in a situation. And you all will get that over time, is you'll know this person X who's working on a problem, and then boom, this person Y who has the same thing, and you say, hey, you two need to talk to each other on this. And again, the more you do this and the more people you know, the more you can become the person who connects all of them and becomes the problem solver. And that's really the best. That's really what you are as an emergency manager, is a problem solver. And the more people you know and the more capabilities you understand, the better you're able to do that. And you'll also be, same thing, the more people who know you can connect you to the people who have that. So the best part of when you go and network at Governor's Hurricane Conference or whatever, yes, you may directly engage with somebody who wants to hire you. But the better part is you're directly engaging with somebody who knows 10 other people. And as soon as they, figure out that one of those 10 needs help, they'll think back to you. So, it's not always the primary connection. It can be the secondary or tertiary that really gets to where you need to go. So that's that was your question back to Irma, was the most challenging one, but timing wise, it came at exactly the right point in terms of the maturity of the administration, the maturity of DEM, the maturity of me as an individual, etc. And so again, not everybody is fortunate. Some people probably started working at DEM, the day COVID hit, or the day, Michael hit, or whatever. You just, but it's blue sky out today. And it's never, so just start working on that stuff now, because it'll pay off eventually when you need it.
Wow.
So thanks for that question.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Wow, thank you. Well, I don't want to.
So
yeah, you ask away. I don't want to hog all the questions.
Go. Okay.
So I am a senior applying to law school right now, and I'm applying to George Washington University as well for their national security law program. So I was just wondering about your experience there and how you think that experience impacted your career.
Good. All right. So a few things. My oldest son's a senior in high school. He's also applying to George Washington. Jared Moskowitz, the director of Florida Division of Emergency Management, went to George Washington. Trying to think of any other local folks who went there. So here's why I chose George Washington. It's because it was the school closest to where I was working at the time. That's the primary reason I went to George Washington, because I was working at the White House and I wanted to get an MBA, and I applied to GW and Maryland, and I got in both. And I said, well, I can walk 4 blocks to GW, or I'd have to drive or take a metro to Maryland. So I'll go to GW. Now, that, again, extremely fortunate, because it was a terrific school and I had a great experience there. It is, it's obviously in the heart of DC. It's, because of that, they get tons of engagement with political folks, the opportunities to do real life, real time experience and work on things is top notch. I still talk to some of the professors that I had today. I still engage with all of those folks. So if you get a chance to go there, I highly recommend it. It's a very vibrant. It's definitely urban. Have you been there? Have you been up there and seen it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
That's where I'm planning on going. My best friend lives up there, so
Okay. It's way different than Tallahassee.
yes.
But it's very exciting. I mean, I lived in DC for about 7 years, 7.5 years, and loved it. It's a great town, particularly when you're young and unencumbered and not afraid to be a little poor. But I mean, you can't beat the opportunities that exist in Washington. So going to law school in Washington sounds like a great idea. And particularly in the area of law that you talked about studying there. National security. What were you're going to do law, but the focus on national security?
Yes, so I'm double majoring in international affairs and political science. So national security law or international diplomacy, different things like that. But there is a national security law program at George Washington, so I was really interested in that.
Okay, good. There's a few people. If you want, drop me a note. I can introduce you to who are there. So a lot of the previous FEMA lawyers are still around. One of them is Ernie Abbott, and Ernie has written and done several books on national security law and disaster law. He has a firm there in Washington, D.C. And Brad Kaiserman was the FEMA general counsel for a while. Now he works at the Red Cross, which is just around the corner from GW. So there's a lot of folks, and obviously there's tons of folks who have that kind of experience. But there are a few very specific folks who I'd be happy to introduce you to and do that. And there's also every year the Bar Association does a national, I forget what it's called exactly, like a Homeland Security Symposium on law that I've spoken at a few times. And so it really brings together all of those kind of folks. So yeah, if that's what you want to focus on, that's probably the best place to go, go study there, GW and Georgetown. So that sounds very interesting. What would your ideal job be upon graduation from that?
Well, I'm very open-minded. I'd be happy working with the government or doing something in the private sector. Probably going into the government though, because while I'm going to law school, being able to work right in DC, I'm not sure exactly. I'm very open, but
yeah, I've
been meeting a lot of people recently, and I'm really excited about the opportunities.
Good. I am not a lawyer, but there are it may be just anecdotal, but it seems to me there are a lot of lawyers in emergency management and a growing number in emergency management. And there's a number of advantages to that. I mean, we obviously deal with nuanced laws and regulations all the time. Contractual law is, extremely important in my line of work that people are doing. So there's lots of benefits to having a legal degree, even if you don't actually become a practicing lawyer. There's a lot of people with law degrees in emergency management, and they tend to do really well. So enjoy your time at GW. It's I really enjoyed it. I didn't get probably the full experience because I was going part-time and working. I think I would have enjoyed it even more if I had been fully immersed in the program. But even part-time, I really had a good time there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I build upon that question a little bit?
Please, yeah.
So I was approached actually because of the IAEM conference about an internship at the DC Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. So I'm in the application process for that and considering going there for the summer, but also looking at Georgetown for grad school. So my question is just what are the main differences that you see between like the emergency management atmosphere in Florida in the private sector and then in DC? Because I know they all differ just a little bit.
Yeah. So we have had contracts with the HCEMA folks in DC, and I've been to their offices a few times. And their current director is whose name is escaping me, Chris. I want to say Gonzalez, but that's not right. Chris, it'll come to me. He has kind of a intel background, and so by his background and the very nature of working in DC, HCEMA is a little bit more focused on man-made situations because that's what they deal with in DC. I mean, you will have the occasional snowstorm and the occasional outskirts of a hurricane or a tropical storm and flooding and stuff like that. But you're going to be doing a lot more with man-made events, and that's great. I mean, that is something that is harder. That's a harder experience to gain at other organizations because they're so hit or miss. And so, by going there, you're more likely to gain some experience in that area that will give you a leg up on others. So you would be able to point to, regardless of when you're in DC, if you spend a month or two there working for them, there'll be some large mass gathering probably that they have to deal with that then you can then point to and say, I have done this, which is great. I mean, I have only done a few of those, like the Republican National Convention in 2014. I think maybe it was 12. Anyway, so, if a traditional emergency manager who works at, say, a county somewhere across the country or even the state level would have less experience, on a per time basis than you would gain for being in DC. So that's one positive aspect, that you'll have less natural disasters that you probably deal with. But again, if you can go do those other places. So that's one aspect of it. It's not a very large organization. Pros and cons for that too. The pro is you get to work on other stuff. You'll be the smaller the organization, the more opportunities you have to get and do different things when you are working with them. The con is less people to learn from, but I would say that would be a terrific opportunity to go to work there because it is a unique, interesting thing, and you would be able to do both, kind of equate with a state organization as well as the other big city organizations who are looking for that experience. So that sounds like a great opportunity. And you would be, I know a few of the folks at Georgetown as well. In fact, that trip I took to Texas last week, Stefan, one of the guys I traveled with is a doctor, a medical doctor who teaches at that Georgetown program. Jeff Stern, Dr. Jeff Stern is one of the professors teachers at Georgetown. Jeff, until last year, was the director of Virginia Division of Emergency Management, and now he is FEMA's director of all of their education programs. So he runs EMI and all the other programs that FEMA does. He's a terrific guy. And then Tim Manning is the other person who teaches at Georgetown. Tim Manning, if you all look him up here, Tim was a deputy administrator or associate administrator, I forget what, during Craig's administration for FEMA. And currently he is Biden's COVID supply chain czar. So he's the one whose name you've seen in the paper in the last few days talking about the Defense Production Act and all supply chain stuff they're working on. So Tim is one of the professors at Georgetown. Really smart guy, real nice guy, my age. He was a director of emergency management for New Mexico prior to joining FEMA. So really great background and experience. So bottom line, the professors that you will get both at George Washington and at Georgetown are really experienced and terrific in their field, and will again be able to help when it comes time to get a job, be able to connect some dots for you, depending on what they're looking on. Because like me, they know most of the people out there, and so when it comes time to say I'm interested in this, there's a pretty good chance they can pick up the phone and call somebody and talk to somebody directly about you. As you know, though, interesting time to be in DC, but almost any time's an interesting time to be in DC.
I do have one question I'm very curious to ask, and I wanted to preface this a little bit by bringing up how we had another big name in the field speak to us last semester, Brock Long, who served as administrator of FEMA, and then now he's at a leadership position at a private sector firm, Haggerty Consulting. And there's kind of a career similarity there, to what you've done, how you were director at FDEM, and then now you're in a leadership position at the private sector firm IAEM. And when Brock spoke to us during his talk, he seemed to very much express a sentiment of like when a disaster strikes and people have to respond, it seemed to be a sentiment of like get the government out of the way and just like let the private sector do its thing. If I may ask, like what would you make of that topic? Like, what do you think is the good balance between public and private in disaster response with relationships and everything?
Yeah. So quick Brock story. I've known Brock for a long time. Brock, when I was at Walmart, Brock was the Alabama director. And then when I left Walmart to go to Florida, Brock actually applied for the Walmart job and didn't get it. and so then he went to Haggerty, and then he got, I'm trying to remember. Then he went to FEMA, and I called up my Walmart friends. I was like, so he could be FEMA administrator, but you can't hire him at Walmart. So he and I, we've intertwined a lot. We both have similar backgrounds, as you said. We also have a passing physical similarity. And so I weigh where I am in my career based on who mistakes me for him or him for me. And so when he was director of Alabama, I would often get called Brock. But then when I became director of Florida, they would call him Bryan. And then he became FEMA administrator. I was like, oh, great. Now I'm back to being called Brock again. So I weigh my ups and downs like that. I also grew a beard last year. And then we became even more physically similar, but I've gotten rid of that now. So I don't know where I was going with that story. I too, though, so my philosophy when I was state director was I want everybody who can take care of themselves to do that so that I can focus on those who have nobody else left to take care of them. And so my goal was to take on as little as possible so that I was assured that I was focused on where the need was the most important. So, that meant that, if the hurricane's going to hit 20 counties, I know which counties are fine on their own, so I can focus on those counties that need more assistance. If it's going to hit a certain population, I know the rich people are fine, and I can focus on the poor people. If it's going to hit 3 utilities, I know that Florida Power and Light and Duke Energy are going to be fine, and I can focus on that one muni or co-op that's going to need the greater assistance. If it's going to hit, like Irma did, Marco Island and Immokalee, I'm probably not going to do anything for Marco Island, and I'm going to do everything I need to for Immokalee. If the community has a Publix, if one community has a Publix and another community only has, a convenience store, the community with Publix is probably going to be fine because they got generators and a great supply chain, and I'm focused on the community that only has a convenience store because they don't have any backup power, and I'm probably going to need to set up a point of distribution there. So the point is, I tried to throughout build up the networks and support them wherever I could on the blue sky days so that they could do what they needed to do, and then I could focus on those areas that were not able to support themselves. And so, yes, absolutely, I was a huge supporter in allowing those folks who have it in hand to do what they need to do, and allow government's limited resources to go where the need is the greatest and handle that piece of it. There was no way that state could do everything for everybody. That's just a recipe for failure. And so really focusing in on where the need is the greatest and what you could do is the most important. And so it doesn't happen automatically. You as government have to set the parameters and give them the permission to be successful in that environment. And so, it's not that hard, give them access to information, up front so they can do what they need to do, and streamline it as much as possible for them to allow them to do the good things that they need to do. And, and then get out of the way. We would, when I was in the state of Florida, bring in representatives from Walmart, bring in representatives from Publix, bring in representatives from Florida Power and Light. Their needs are generally very small, and we would help them overcome whatever obstacles they had so they could be successful, and they would bring, things like, hey, this one issue is preventing us from opening this store. And I knew that if we opened that store, then we didn't need a point of distribution there. We didn't need X, Y, Z. And so, boom, let's fix that one issue, and you go on and handle that situation there. So really it's about, and it all goes back to the networking piece of it, creating the access and the information necessary for those folks to be successful. And so I was a big proponent of engaging everybody as much as I could and allowing them to be involved with the information flow and the process and understand what we were doing so that they could tie in at the appropriate place and be involved with the process and offer, ways to help improve it and to do it better. So yes, I think Brock and I were similar in that. Brock had tremendous challenges during his time there. He had Harvey, Irma, and Maria back to back, which was until 2020, the worst anybody has seen. So, but he did a good job of that. On a side note, Pete Gaynor, the recently left administrator, is out there looking for work. So you are competing against Pete Gaynor for a job in the emergency management field. I still talk to Pete a lot, and he's taking a little time off to figure out what he wants to do next. But frankly, the world is his oyster at this point. He can go do whatever he wants. But it does, there's one more EM candidate out there looking for a job. So be wary of that.
Yeah, good to know. Thank you. Well, would anyone else like to ask questions? I mean, this is a great talk going on right now, so soak it up.
Yeah, I'd be down to ask another question. One of the questions I have is a lot of what Brock Long talked about was like the sustainability of emergency management in its current form, and his assertion was that it wasn't very sustainable with the amount of money that was being basically poured onto these fires of disasters, whether they are hurricanes or literal wildfires. Do you share that belief, or do you have a different take on it?
No, well, I mean, it's very easy to see that the rate of money that we spend on recovery these days just keep going up and up and up and up and up. In fact, I think in my briefcase, I've got a paper I need to read, something of, the increasing cost of natural disasters. Yes, at some point, and it happens periodically, and you see it all the time. Congress will, get fed up with it and try to come up with some method to reduce the cost of it. It's not happening right now because the monies that we spend on natural disasters are paling in comparison to all the COVID money and other things. But yes, it's absolutely predictable that at some point Congress and state governments and local governments will get fed up with the amount of money that we're pouring into natural disasters, man-made disasters, and try to buckle down on it. You saw that at the end of, and it's a recurring thing, and you'll see that what you see that played out in is that FEMA wants to reduce the number of disasters that get declared. And this is, again, a recurring thing. It happened in 2016 when FEMA tried to implement or proposed an idea about a deductible model in which the FEMA recovery dollars were kind of treated like an insurance fund in which the state had to really pay like a deductible prior to be eligible for any kind of federal government assistance. There's a new proposed rule out there now which has something similar. The idea being that states and local governments invest more in mitigation activities, invest more in their own response and recovery capabilities so that the federal government isn't left holding the bag when these occur. And theoretically, that's a great idea. The challenge comes down to, every time the state legislature meets and every time the city council meets and the county commissioners meet and try to allocate the dollars, as you probably know, mitigation activities and other things sometimes fall by the wayside. And so, it just historically hasn't been given the investments necessary to reduce overall the amount of recovery dollars are going to be necessary in a large scale event. So yes, Brock is right. And it's going to take a while probably before all of that gets built into a methodology to really reduce the overall cost of it, because it's not just one or two things. You got to work on building codes. You have to work on individual and community preparedness. You've got to work on the insurance industry. At the same time, we're going to be spending billions and trillions of dollars on improving the infrastructure, improving our bridges and roads, our drainage systems, dealing with, there's an article I read in the Washington Post this afternoon about rapid increasing ice loss. So sea level rise is going to be going like this over the next few years, and we're just going to be spending trillions of dollars on the coastlines, on those kinds of things. So I think we'll look back on this perhaps as the good old days of when disasters only cost us hundreds of millions or low billions of dollars, into the future disasters that are going to make these look, cheap by comparison. So yes, I agree with Brock, and yes, there are things that need to get done, and it's going to be really, really hard to do it, to make it all happen. We've made progress through the BRIC and other mitigation programs that have been designed. Now it's a matter of trying to get them implemented and really affecting the change that we hope they make for us. that's a great, if you were, there's an economist named Howard Kunreuther, Kunreuther. He's at Penn. He's at Wharton Business School up at Penn. Howard wrote his first book, I think, in 1962, called The Economics of Natural Disasters. And he's written a number of books since then. A lot of them are focused on flood insurance and other things. But if any of you want to combine economics and natural disasters, there is a field there and there is a career there for you. Either in doing pure straight out economics, or working in the insurance industry, or working in finance. That's a fascinating area that if I were to go back to being 18 again, I would probably pursue that one. Somewhere in the intersection of economics, natural disasters, policy, risk, insurance, et cetera, because that's where a lot of focus and investment and time and big money is going to be spent over the next few decades working on that. So yeah, I was going to reference that scene in The Graduate where he says plastics, but that may be a really old reference that nobody gets, but that's what I'm telling you is disaster economics. That's maybe an interesting field for you all to consider.
Oh yeah, well, I haven't even announced this yet, but we're actually doing a joint meeting with the Economics Club in March, where an FSU professor will discuss basically like the economics of disaster recovery. He's doing research on Hurricane Michael, so yeah, we're actually going to cover that in the future.
Good. Invite me to that. I would be interested in just watching that.
Yeah, I'll for sure will invite you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I did want to ask. This is something I'm so curious about. What would you say is your overall take on specifically the state of Florida's response to COVID since last spring?
Let me say, I'm just scrolling to see. Is anybody from FDEM on? No, I'm kidding. Listen, I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback anybody at this point. I talked to Jared Moskowitz several times a week. I talked to all of those guys. I was over at FDEM this morning, just getting a COVID test. Talk about, that's an extremely challenging environment. Obviously there were some things that went a little screwy at the beginning on supply chains, but everybody was doing it. Was scrambling to find all of those things. I think at the end of the day, the amount of money that has been spent by Florida and others has been astronomical. I think there were, in retrospect, did we shut down too late? Yes. Did we open up too early? Yes. Can vaccines be done better? Yes. All of those things. In general, though, I think they've done the best with what they've known at the time and what the political atmosphere in which they operate and the folks they have. Again, one of the philosophical and political things for you all to take a look at, and you hear this all the time, and Brock probably said it when he spoke to you guys, is all disasters are local. And there's a tendency, particularly in this last administration, to really push down responsibility. FEMA was eager to get it down to the state, and the state was really eager to get it down to the locals and encourage local decision making and driving of it, et cetera. The problem is when you have a national problem, that just doesn't work. All you end up with is a fragmented effort in which people are, states are competing against states for PPE, for dollars, for vaccines, and that's what you had here. So I was, again, I think it would be a very interesting government class, if you're looking for another intersection overlap, to study truly where should this effort have been driven from. Should it have been driven from the federal level more than it was? My theory is yes, because again, I think we would have been better allocated the PPE. We'd have paid less money for it. We could have driven the manufacturing and production of it. We would have had more consistent messaging and application, and probably ultimately saved lives. And I think part of that is because for so long we focused on that all disasters are local mantra, when we came to a disaster that wasn't local, that we didn't treat it appropriately. So again, I'm interested to see how academics treat that, how emergency management academics treat that, how you all treat that over the next few years as we do start coming out of this and then evaluating and figure out how we could have done it better. So keep me all in the loop on that. And I want to read your papers and thoughts and theses, et cetera, on that. And tell me what you come up with. because it's going to happen again. So, let's learn from it.
Definitely. Would anyone else like to ask anything?
Yeah, hi Brian. I'm William Garcia. Thanks for coming to talk to us today. I'm just a recent graduate and from FSU, and I'm gonna go back for my master's, but I'm kind of really eager to get in the job field because I feel that's the best way to learn is just getting that hands-on. So I'm just doing contract work right now in the meantime for environmental remediation company, removing unexploded munitions. But to break out,
that's an interesting job.
It is.
That's a great
just
pickup
not as
line.
consistent. Yeah, if it was consistent and year round, but I mean, it's just kind of harder to do because same thing, like, classes, people are coming out of the schools and classes, so you're constantly competing with, with more people, in the market. But I've always been interested in emergency management, being able to see the problem before it happens, and trying to find innovations to do that. But I was looking for your opinion in breaking out in your career and trying to get that experience to get those upper end director jobs. Is it better to get with a public or private sector and move around laterally within that company? Or is it, maybe stay, 2 years here, learn everything you can, and then moves to somewhere else and try to gain the experience, from another perspective?
Yeah. I would kind of take kind of a zigzag approach where you're moving diagonally upwards every time. It's perfectly acceptable. Lots of people do it, moving between public and private, moving between different levels of government, gaining those new experiences and moving, slightly upward every time. It's occasional, maybe you'll get some big jumps in there. It's even okay to move to lateral if it's worth the experience that you will gain. So especially on the money side of it, when I left DC to go to work for Walmart, I think I took like a $40,000 pay cut.
Wow.
But it was worth it because I knew that the experience that I would gain at Walmart would ultimately pay off. I'm not sure my wife was on board with that, but it ultimately paid off, because I knew that my career in DC, you kind of get some golden handcuffs there. You get a security clearance there and you're doing work and it's interesting, but everybody else is doing the same thing. So the opportunities to really distinguish yourself are difficult. I knew that if I took that job in Walmart, that I would be it'd be only a handful of people with that kind of experience. I'd get to do some fascinating stuff that would help propel me and do that. So look for that. There may be times that you're going to choose experience or something interesting over the money. And ultimately, it can pay off better for you. It'll pay off in that you'll be happier because you'll be doing something that interests you. And it will position you better for more success in the future. So it's not always, the job and the money aren't always directly related. It's nice when they are, but there will be times when you go do something because it ties in better with what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, when you're evaluating the next option, think about the outcomes that you want to have of it, who you want to meet, what kind of experiences you want to have, what you want to be able to accomplish. And at the end, when you're done with that one, which you'll be able to look back and be proud of and point to and say, I helped do this. Because I think that will be ultimately more rewarding. The money will follow, hopefully. And, but at the end of the day, if you can look back on the things that you've accomplished and helped build, you'll feel so much better about your career. And, ultimately all of it will fall together, hopefully.
Absolutely.
But again,
thank you so much.
I've only had one career, so I can't really tell you. I mean, there's plenty of ways of skinning a cat. So talk to other people and get their opinions on it too, because there might, people have done it completely differently and also been extremely successful.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
I have another quick question. So,
okay.
Administrator Gaynor, we all know, became the acting secretary of Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
And I know for me that was super cool because it was like, the first time that I've really seen an upper level emergency management leader kind of take a cabinet position, much less just like anything outside of emergency management directly within the government. Do you think that's kind of a phenomenon that might become more common in the emergency management sector? Should we be gaining experience and then trying to diversify the ways that we use it? Or do you think as public servants, we should kind of stay in our lane?
That's funny. The funny thing was when Pete became secretary, he was actually acting secretary twice, I think. I think he was acting secretary for like 8 hours several months ago so that he could appoint Chad Wolf to be the acting secretary or something. And then when he was for the second time, I was like, dude, people are going to look at your resume and think that you're terrible at this because you were acting secretary for like 9 days. That's not going to look good on your resume. You're going to have to explain that to people. That was all a joke, of course. But, the interesting thing is you will have the opportunity to fleet up into roles that are outside of core emergency management. And, you may want to do them, you may not. But I know lots of emergency managers who have gone on to become whoever their supervisor was. And those roles typically have a broader responsibility. So now they've gone from emergency managers, now they're like director of public safety or something, and they're overseeing some law enforcement functions. They may be doing, sometimes in other places, it's a more fire driven role, as you saw with Pete, now he's in charge of 22 different agencies that are outside of emergency management. So those do happen. And it's a natural consequence of one, being good at your job and extremely competent, and the people who, the elected officials and others who are responsible for that, knowing that you can do that job and moving you up there. So yeah, I mean, if that's something that if you're open to it, that is something that absolutely can occur. I don't know that it's, Pete's isn't the norm, and that may never happen again. Hopefully we'll have administrations in the future that are more stable than the last 4 years have been. So that shouldn't occur in the future, but it could. But yes, the other thing is you may get, sometimes you see county directors and others who do a completely different job in their government space. Some of the folks I've known in Florida have left being the EM to do something completely different also in county government. And some of them love doing that, some of them don't love doing that, but I would at least be aware of it and open to it, because you'll gain some interesting and different perspectives. So yeah, it'll open doors for you, and it may open doors that you never considered, and you can take advantage of it or kind of stick with the core side of it. And it also depends on where you are in your career. I mean, if you're doing emergency management right now and you want to be a county director or a state director, but on your first job that public works wants you or animal control wants you, that may not be the right time to go out and do that kind of thing. But later on, you've kind of vision it like a tree, branching out. When you're farther up the tree, you got a whole lot more opportunities than if you just kind of shoot off to the side, at the base of the tree. I know that's a weird analogy. I just made it up, but that's kind of, you'll get lots of interesting things that occur. I recall when I was it was like 2016, I think. And I was still in the state of Florida, and I got a call from a recruiting firm, and they were looking for a director of security for NASCAR. And this would have been a person whose job was to go to like 30 NASCAR races a year and work with all local security officials. And I was like, hell, that sounds really exciting. I'd do that. Yeah, I think I got through the second round of the interview and ultimately lost to an FBI guy. That probably wasn't the right fit for me, but at least it was interesting idea to explore. So those things will pop up in your career too, and check them out, see what they're like.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
You're welcome.
Well, anyone else? All right, well, hey, that works out. I mean, it's like almost 8:20, so makes for a good meeting. Well, thank you so much, Bryan. I mean, this was massively helpful and interesting to listen to.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it. That was fun. I get to see everybody's house and dorm rooms and apartments and stuff. This was fun. You all have nicer places than I do, so I'm taking decorating hints from all of you. Stefan, you got my phone number? Do you have an email? Just pass that along to everybody. Anybody wants to touch base with me, please do. I'll be happy to help in any way I can, and make connections for you in DC or wherever it is you want to go. Let me know. I'll be happy to introduce you around. I love, I think many of you know, I did as much as I could for FSU Emergency Management when I was in Florida. We really ramped up the internships at the division. I brought a lot of groups along to different conferences and meetings so that they could start engaging and networking with folks. So I'm a big proponent of FSU Emergency Management, and want all of you guys to be successful. I would like for all of you to start infiltrating things so that later on in a decade or two when I need a job, you can hire me for something.
Of course, we'll keep you in mind for sure.
Great.
Well, and we'll also we're going to definitely send out your info, encourage people to get in touch with you. We're also going to be sending out links for the Governor's Hurricane Conference, the main site with all the information about it, the link for the Student Scholarship Program. Definitely encouraging you guys to apply to that, and follow Bryan's advice about how important networking is in the field. This upcoming conference is such a premier opportunity for that. And so, yeah, I really encourage you guys to get involved. And thank you so much, Bryan, for speaking to us tonight.
All right, you're welcome. All right, guys, have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bryan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Well, now that our speaker has left, before you all go, just some brief announcements about this semester. And I meant to introduce myself and the officers at the beginning. Totally forgot. I'm so excited about the speaker. If this is your first time here for any of you, just to give very brief introductions, my name is Stephen Bobbin. I'm the president of the chapter. Pass it over to Lucian now.
Hi guys, I'm Lucian Conti. I'm the sitting vice president. Just really happy to see a lot of familiar faces or familiar names. If your cameras aren't working, please turn on your cameras next time. We want to see you guys. Awesome.
And I'm James Reisner. I'm the treasurer here.
I'm Ashlyn Gamble. I'm the public information officer who does all the events.
Yes, massively helpful with that. And so, yeah, besides the introductions, we're on social media. I mean, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. We have a general body group chat on GroupMe. You can join and network with other people and pass, useful info around. We have a Facebook group as well, and we're going to email all this out to you. So make sure you sign up on the sign-up sheet that's in the chat that Lucian put in earlier. We can get all of our emails about our events and lots of helpful EM info about many things going on. And all I love to announce also is our next meeting. We usually do bi-weekly meetings, but because we pushed this one back, we're going to have another one next week to start the semester with bi-weekly meetings. And next week's topic is going to be smart security using UAS, unmanned aircraft systems. And our speaker is going to be someone named Kevin Sanders, who is a U.S. Air Force veteran. And he currently also he works as the director of business development for a company called Valero Drones. And he's also going to be working the Super Bowl in Tampa with UAS technology to help with the security measures there. And so he's going to talk a little bit about that. And that's going to be another great talk. And we're going to email out the Facebook event for that probably tomorrow. And so, yeah, hope to see you all there. I'm so glad you all came out tonight. And we're going to have another great semester with a lot of big name speakers, ones we haven't even announced yet. A lot of great networking opportunities on the horizon. And it's going to be really great, guys. So thank you so much. And we're going to stick around in the chat for a few minutes if anyone wants to ask any questions or anything. Okay. Yippee.
No one's got any questions.
Oh, yeah, I should stop the recording.